Hi, this is Pranavi from India Abroad. I want to ask you about your new book, After Nations. It argues that the nation state is no longer a real unit of power. For immigrants who still depend on passports and visas and borders to survive, who do you think actually benefits when nation states get weaker?
So I wouldn't say that nation states are necessarily getting weaker or disappearing, but nation states are definitely in a moment of transition. I think some are getting weaker, some are getting arguably more powerful. But definitely the power system is changing. I think for immigrants, immigration or migration in general is one of the symptoms of the sort of transition we're talking about, because some nation states are clearly unable to give their citizens the kinds of goods that they expected, whether it's economic, legal, political. And so people are moving to some of the countries where they think the nation state is still strong enough to give those things. So, one of the questions that confronts us right now is how can we restore, maybe at the global level, to those countries and to those citizens some of the things they can't get at home, so they don't have to undertake very dangerous journeys in order to get the things they should always have got at home, that are their basic human rights.
You also talk about global cities as power centers that often matter more than countries. For immigrants in places like New York and London, do cities replace as real sources of belonging?
Yes, I mean, cities are where all the power of the world is focused and where all the capital is focused. And so there are lots of cities that have more in common with other cities than they do with, let's say, the countryside around them. And so lots of immigrants, when they go to the United States, they don't think about the United States, they think about New York, or they think about LA. They're going to those places and they're looking to be part of a city. But cities are very much, in some ways, cities are very much in a class war with the global countryside. And so a lot of the people in the world that I'm very concerned about are the people in the global countryside who receive the least benefit from the nation-state system, who are the most exposed and vulnerable to the nation-state system, and are the ones who are most likely to have to move in order to get proper treatment.
And why do you think today more than ever borders feel more violent and policed than ever, especially for migrants?
Because borders are, of course, the places where the nation-state system exerts its power. And as we know today, the real purpose of the system, I mean, it's not just a difference between, let's say, India and Pakistan or Bangladesh or whatever. The nation-state system is a class system to divide the wealthy zones of the world from the poor zones of the world, to divide war from peace, to divide ecological devastation from zones of ecological preservation. And so one of the things it has to do is to stop people moving between those zones. So as you find yourself in a zone where the nature is being destroyed, where there's war, where there's no job opportunities, you obviously wish to move. And all the military forces of the nation-state system are there to prevent you from doing so. So borders become very violent. And many of the real stories in the world are the real borders, the US-Mexico border, the North African border between the African continent and the Mediterranean, and therefore Europe. And these are the places where we see the real sort of moral fabric of this system that is really about trying to keep rich from poor and localize profit.
You've also suggested that the traditional ideas of sovereignty no longer explain how power works. For immigrants facing deportation and legal precarity today,
So explain to me, why are we talking about immigrants so much?
Because this is India Abroad and we also cover diplomacy.
Okay.
I wanted to get your insight.
Right.
For immigrants facing deportation and legal precarity today, what framework should replace sovereignty to understand their vulnerability?
Well, in the short term, nothing can replace national sovereignty, and that's what's very, very frightening for immigrants that find themselves suddenly the target of deportation and things like that, which Indian immigrants around the world are targets of this. It's a new wave of violence. So I think in the long term, we need to start building systems that place migrants and immigrants at the center, not just the margins. We've seen Ukraine, we've seen Gaza, we've seen that people who are suddenly evicted from their citizenship, evicted from their nation states, or who find themselves in a hostile state, they have very particular kinds of needs, very particular kind of legal needs. And those, I think, are the things that we need to be paying attention to as we build alternative kinds of citizenship, alternative kinds of legal systems, which, as I say in my book, should start with, let's say, a universal digital citizenship that could start to be the basis of some of these
that's
systems.
what my next question. Do you think migrants will be able to force to invent new forms of collective identity faster than the societies that never had the chance to leave?
Yeah, I think some of the people who are migrants today are among some of the most ingenious, brilliant, technologically aware people in the world, and of necessity they will start to build these. Now these systems have already grown up. Ukraine is of course a place with many, many young, brilliant software people, logistics people. Ukrainian refugees have already built several systems to communicate with each other and everything. I think some of these systems will become larger and embrace many other kinds of nationalities. There are examples of dysfunctional dictatorships like Belarus, where people don't have access to information, they only have access to state propaganda, they can't locate people who have been taken by the state. Iran is another country where a lot of very brilliant young people are using technology to document abuses by the state, to find people who've been disappeared, and to help connect people who have lost touch with each other in a place where the state has shut down internet. I think out of all these different examples, people will start to build systems that can guarantee basic levels of citizen information and rights against states that want to deprive people of those rights, and that can start to be the building blocks for, let's say, I don't want to be too romantic, but a global citizenry that is protected against states that may or may not stand up for their rights.
You're an immigrant yourself. What do you want administrations to understand about immigration? For example, what's happening in the US regarding the H-1B visa and the changing policies today. What is that one thing you want the administrations to understand about immigration?
Well, I think that, two things basically. One is that human beings have always moved. It's the basic fact about human beings since the dawn of time. The very fact that we don't all live in Africa is because we, as a species, have moved from the very beginning. Every time there are problems, human beings have moved to escape those problems, whether it's ice ages or ecological breakdown. So movement is a natural thing, and the reason we are so rich and sophisticated as a species is because people have moved and carried knowledge with them and carried culture and ideas with them. And so movement is natural. The nation-state system made it look as if movement was not natural, that people belong in a certain place and they should not move. So we've got to a place where so many countries today find themselves in this moment of economic anxiety and political anxiety, where they're taking it out on migrants and treating migrants as the problem and thinking if they can solve the problem of migration, then everything will be okay. This is completely false. It's usually a completely false diagnosis of the problems that those countries have. Those countries are functioning because of the riches that migrants have brought in. Migrants are not the enemy. They need to address fundamental economic and political problems and not think that they will solve them by deporting people and all that sort of thing. So countries need to learn that they need to work with migrants, they need to work with migration. These are natural parts of the human story, and probably migration is going to increase, not decrease, with time, because a lot of the problems of the poorest parts of the world are going to get more and more severe, and waves of migration are going to happen whether or not the police forces and the military and the border controls try to stop them. So we need to develop ideas of human life, ideas of politics that work with migration, that understand the benefits of migration, and that can use migration as a vehicle to economic growth and better things, rather than just a cause of anxiety and fear.